Before we begin, I do want to just acknowledge that Mary McAllister couldn't be here today, and she put her name on the list to speak first, and so I'm going to read her comment on her behalf. Dear VMP team, I'm unable to attend the June 29th public meeting regarding Oakland's Vegetation Management Plan because I will be out of town. I'm writing to request that this email be added to the public record. The Center for Investigative Reporting is a highly respected source of deeply researched news stories. They have published an excellent article about the 1991 fire in the East Bay, which is based on an interview with Jan Knoll, who was the lead forecaster for the National Weather Service in the Bay Area at the time of the fire. The article accurately identifies the factors that contributed to the 1991 fire. Here are a few of the issues covered by this article. Wildfires cause the most property damage and loss of life when they occur in the wildland-urban interface, where homes are built in wooded areas. In the East Bay, those homes are more vulnerable during wildfires because they were often covered in wooden shingles that ignite easily and become burning embers in a wind-driven fire, such as the 1991 fire. California's Mediterranean climate creates a landscape that is fire-adaptive and fire-dependent. Winter rains produce fires of grasses that dry out during the summer dry season and become fuel that ignites easily. The 1991 fire started in grass, as most fires in California do. There was even more fuel available in the 1991 fire because the previous winter, an unusually deep and long freeze caused a lot of vegetation and trees to die back, becoming dry fuel in the fall of 1991 when the fire occurred. These freezes are very rare in the Bay Area. There hasn't been another such freeze since 1990, and in the warming climate, there is unlikely to be another. Finally, the Bay Area infrequently experiences strong winds during heat waves. The wind originates in the hot interior and blows into the cooler Bay Area. These are locally called Diablo winds, and they create unusually dangerous fire conditions because they create even drier conditions in which ignition is more likely, and then they drive the fire rapidly through the dry fuel. The CIR report concludes with wise words from Jan Knoll about how to reduce fire hazards in the Bay Area. The largest, and I quote, "The largest issues identified after the 1991 fire were mostly related to firefighting. These included better communication between agencies, standardization of equipment, and ensuring defensible space around homes." And then she cites the full article. Thank you, Mary McAllister. So thank you, Mary. Sorry you couldn't be here tonight. Now I'm going to call the first three speakers so that the second and third can get ready. We have Isis Farrell, Dan Garcetti, and Leon Hovland. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. All right, come on up. Oh, sure.
Hi, my name is Isis Farrell. I'm a member of the coalition. I'm a member of the Coalition to Defend East Bay Forests, but I'm representing only myself today. City communications with the public continue to be absolutely abysmal, and has many of us wondering just how sincerely interested officials really are in public involvement. I've been involved in the discussion about the vegetation management EIR for over 12 years. Back in 2005, everyone involved in the process refused to make a mailing list to send out updates and insisted we had to monitor various city web pages and tiny ads in newspapers. Hardly anyone knew about the FEMA EIS scoping meetings until neighbors got the word out ourselves and packed the last session. I see the same thing happening here again. I've signed up for email notifications for the Vegetation Management Plan, the Wildfire Prevention Assessment District, and the Fire Chief hiring process, but received no notice from anyone about the May 24th Public Safety Committee agenda report related to the WPAT and the Vegetation Management Plan. I found out about the May 31st and June 1st Vegetation Management Forums well after the fact. I recently attended a meeting about hiring a new fire chief, where a city representative pondered why those meetings were not as well attended as those hiring a new police chief. But it's not a mystery. The meetings were badly publicized. Not to mention that most people in Oakland know that the chances of being killed by a cop are far greater than being killed in a fire. But the vegetation management plans the WPAT has been pushing over the last decade has many of us in the flatlands worrying for the first time since 1991 about fire danger from the hills. And it's not reassuring that another of these meetings is being held in the hills, where it's hard for people from the flats to get to, instead of a central location like City Hall, which validates the concern that this EIR process will be biased and prioritize the voices of some over those of others. This is not a hills issue. The fire risk in the hills spreads to the flatlands, and the fire risk in the hills is human development, not plans. The mayor's task force found that it was primarily tinderbox houses that spread the 1991 fire. Houses set trees on fire. Exploding gas lines rippled through the hills. An EIR is not done for a little pruning, but implies extensive vegetation management activities that will cause substantial environmental impact. The survey questions clearly demonstrated the vegetation management in this plan will be focused on destroying plants. We know the folks from the WPAD want to destroy trees, and if you cater to their wishes, you will increase the fire danger for all of us, as fires spread faster if trees are removed and grasslands take over, or pesticides or other chemicals are used that are flammable and emit toxic fumes when burned. The WPAD, which should have ended when residents in the district voted for it to end, has long promoted unscientific fear-mongering that aims to drastically alter the Oakland landscape and ecology under the guise of fire safety, when in reality it would ultimately endanger Oakland and surrounding areas with fires that spread faster and further into the flatlands. What's keeping us safe from catastrophic fires are those big trees that precipitate fog, drip, and provide wind breaks. And if you threaten them, there are many community members who are prepared to keep the trees safe from you. Any vegetation management that requires an EIR is too drastic. Instead of spending public money on destroying plants, it should be spent on relocating residents who are afraid of trees to somewhere they would feel safer. Choosing to live in the hills is not a prerogative to deforest. Buying a plot of land should not grant someone control over the surrounding ecology. People who are afraid of trees should not live in a forest. I never got a response to the questions I asked the first stakeholder briefing, so I'm going to ask some of them again. How will this vegetation management plan differ from the plan in the FEMA EIS? How are you planning to cut down trees? How many, where, and which ones? In the fact sheet you sent out, and what was echoed here again, what does treatment mean? Are you planning to use pesticides? Which ones, where, how much, how often? Are you aware that Oakland prohibits the use of pesticides for fire prevention purposes? Do you know the health and environmental effects of any chemicals you plan to use? Why are these events held in the hills, where it's difficult for people from the flatlands to get to? Why are they not held in a central location like City Hall, where we're all stakeholders of our forests? If the people of Oakland oppose the plan, will you stop its implementation? Thank you.
Thanks, Isis. I don't think we are in a position at this early stage to answer a lot of those questions, but Ken or Scott, do we have any information on how this might be different than FEMA?
I can't really speak to the, well, let me put it this way. I think we've tried to explain what we are doing here, and I think people can maybe make their own conclusions on where this is different to FEMA. I think what we're demonstrating is site-specific analysis of existing conditions, and then based on those site-specific conditions, development of an approach and a plan that's focused on those conditions. So maybe I'll just leave it at that for now. I think when the plan is developed, people can kind of line them up and compare it and make their own conclusions.
Yeah, can you say something, though? You showed us three different...
Sorry, we're going to just go through this list. If you want to ask a question, I just ask that you add your name to this, and then the whole room can hear the question and we can try and respond to it. Just, Isis, in response to your question about meeting in city proper, I hear you. We will remember that for the next round of meetings. That's a fair criticism. Again, when you sign up for our email alerts, this project team is committed to keeping you informed by email, making sure you know of the meetings. We can't attest to all the city's meetings, but I know that they're committed as well. And
I can answer that.
Sure.
So the meeting that was referred to was not a WPAD meeting, it was the Public Safety Committee of the City Council. So there's, good, bad, and indifferent. There are different email lists to sign up for. So there are meetings pertaining to the Oakland Vegetation Management Plan will provide that. City council meetings, they have, there's the City of Oakland meetings, sign-up lists, like if you're interested in public safety, planning commission meetings, you can check off which meetings or which groups you're interested in participating in. So I apologize that you weren't given any notification about the public safety meeting, but that's a separate email list. There's another opportunity.
Why?
Pardon?
Why? It was about the vegetation management plan. Why were we not notified that it was up in front of the public safety committee?
That wasn't primarily about the vegetation management plan.
It was
That
also.
it was also, and perhaps in the future we can add that to an announcement. But that was primarily about invoicing for privately owned properties and no, not public properties. The vegetation management plan is about public properties. So there was an interest in discussing property inspections of privately owned properties, what the training was, if there was concern about invoicing.
Are you talking about
Okay, I have a lot of people on this list, so I'm going to
No,
interrupt
but it's a
this
separate
one-on-one
process. It's a separate
conversation.
It shouldn't be.
Ken, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to respond or make a comment regarding location of the meeting. Oh, sorry. Just as far as location of the meeting, and we hear you, and I think we can, at the next meeting, we can do that downtown or City Hall or find that's fine. But in defense of why we chose to have a meeting here, it's because I've been in a number of projects where you don't have a meeting in the plan area, and people then say, well, why are you doing it, outside of the plan area? Have the meeting where people, or we're in the area of the plan. And so it wasn't a strategy here to exclude anyone, by no means at all. The strategy here was to have these meetings or these briefings in the locations that are directly kind of in the middle of this plan area, and that was all. It was just that simple. So going forward, we can have meetings downtown and at the City Hall. It's easy.
Okay, I don't see Dan in the room. Oh, sorry. Hi, how are you? Come on up. And then we have Lion Hovland, and then we have Lynn Barron. Actually, I'd like to be able to control the meeting by keeping this microphone open.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Is it okay if I turn it around? And face
You
the
may.
room?
I think that comes off of the hook if you want to. Or, yep, just do that.
Look at that. So I'm Dan Versetti. I'm the founder of the Hills Conservation Network, a group that's been involved in these debates for quite a while now, and we've actually just finished up our third lawsuit recently. And hopefully this will be the last. It'll be the last one. We won't have to do any more. And so we're approaching this from the standpoint of hopefully everybody involved in this process and in this room has learned something as a result of everything that's happened in the last 10 years. And maybe, just maybe, we'll try and do something differently so that we can actually move forward and with sort of a unified approach that everybody is okay with, or everybody's not okay with, but equally not okay with. But I think the lesson here is that, if you look at what happened in the FEMA lawsuit, ultimately what happened is that the two agencies that were more committed, and really one of them was the most committed to a very, very extreme methodology for dealing with wildfire risk, ended up losing funding from FEMA, and the city of Oakland was in some ways sort of an innocent bystander that got caught in the middle and lost its funding as well. But the good news from our standpoint, and I think from the community standpoint, is that FEMA took the money that would have been allocated to UC and the city of Oakland and allocated it instead to East Bay Parks. So what happened was the same $6 million is being spent to reduce fire risk, but the lesson out of this, we think, and we hope that folks embrace, is that reasonable, rational practices that have broad community acceptance are more likely to go unchallenged in the courts whereas extreme methodologies are far more likely to be challenged. And I think all of us who live here would like to see progress made on this. And I was interesting looking at the survey results. Thank you very much for going through those. That, it seemed like the majority of people who responded to the survey wanted minimally invasive methods employed to deal with the hazard. And I think that's where we're at. So with that, I have a few sort of rambling questions here. Pardon me in advance for their randomness, but here goes. So one of the things that came up big time in the FEMA EIS, and I think was in no small way responsible for some of the problems that ran into, was the question of what constitutes fuel versus biomass. And what happened in the FEMA EIS is that the term fuel really became used as a surrogate for biomass. And in the course of developing, our briefs for the lawsuit, we consulted with some renowned experts. And what we learned was that simply because there's some biomass growing, that doesn't mean it's fuel. From a firefighter perspective, professional firefighter, wildland firefighter perspective, a great big tree that has very high moisture content and is alive and healthy is not fuel, but dried dead trees on the ground are fuel. And so what became kind of silly as we went through this whole thing is that, in fact, what happened if you took healthy green trees and you cut them down and you ground them up and you made them into chips, you actually converted non-fuel biomass into fuel biomass. And so I ask this question because I think it's important to be just really clear about this. If you take any old large tree, the percentage of that tree that's actually likely to burn or in a wildland fire is relatively small. It's the canopy. It's the fine fuels, things with a diameter of less than 3 inches. And what's happened in the past in some of these analyses is that folks have said that you must reduce fuel, and what they've done is they've constructed this sort of faulty logic that says that the entire biomass of a large tree is fuel, and therefore you have to get rid of it because that's tons and tons and tons of fuel. When in fact, the real fuel is the stuff that's actually likely to burn, which, as we've learned in our research, are the fine fuels, which are a diameter of less than 3 inches. Irrespective of species, and of course, dead stuff is likely to burn. So I asked that question.
Sorry, it's been more than 5 minutes, and I have a big list here.
Okay, I'll
so
go
can
really
you?
fast for the rest here.
Okay.
So, but if you could respond to that, that would be great. One thing that seems
So
encouraging.
just to clarify, are you asking how we're defining the
Yes.
term fuel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then on fire behavior modeling that was referred to, is the intention to use Flam map or some other methodology?
Flam map.
Okay.
The answer was Flam map.
So one of the problems that came up in the course of the FEMA EIS was that Flam map was used for environments that were not really very appropriate for the use of Flam map, and that was particularly with eucalyptus forests. What was suggested and is generally held as the better approach is for eucalyptus forests, one should use Vesta, which is the Australian government commissioned methodology that was specifically designed for eucalyptus forests. On biological resources mapping, is the plan to consult with Fish and Wildlife and do a formal biological assessment, and you can answer that later on. And also, the related question, is the plan to also consult with other agencies like the Forest Service, Park Service, and others, as FEMA did, which had a very significant impact in how the document was developed. And then finally, this is a question about priority recommendations. So I think it was really encouraging that you're doing the plan and then you're going to do the analysis. Part of what has come out, and I think is one of the reasons that East Bay Parks has had less trouble getting funding for projects, is that they are financial realists. And I think we all realize that there's never enough money to do everything that you want to do. So that implies that in the course of developing a plan, it's critically important to have a Pareto listing of the highest risk down to the lowest risk. So while the plan should probably cover all of the risks, it's unlikely that the city of Oakland will ever have enough money to do all of it. So, we think, as residents here, that it's critically important that the plan be very, very clear in saying that you get the best bang for the buck by clearing adjacent to roadsides or fine fuels or brush or whatever it is on down the list. And then I think it all makes more sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, Lynn Hovland, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Then we have Lynn Barron and then Nick Vigilante. And then because we are going to take up this full hour, I would just ask if you folks could try and keep your comments between 3 and 5 minutes. That'd be really appreciated.
We all want to decrease the risk of fire in the neighborhoods where we live. That's what we're most interested in. I witnessed the 1991 fire. I've lived in the hills for 43 years. Eucalyptus and other non-native vegetation have been blamed for the fire. And as Mary McAllister said, she had read an article recently, I have it here, it's very convincing, that it was weather that was the main cause of the fire, especially the wind, the Diablo wind. And this Jan Null, who's a forecaster and a teacher at San Francisco State, says that one of the most important things is to develop computer models so that firefighters can tell exactly in maybe 3 or 4 hours before, as the fire is just beginning to break out, where the fire is going to move, where the wind is going to go. And she says, this Jan Null says, today there are better micro and mesoscale forecast models. So we are able to look at what wind patterns over just an area that is burning during the firefighting process. The incident meteorologists are able to give better briefings about what the conditions are and what lessons and what they're going to be in the short term. It is important for the firefighting team to have that data so they can say, here are the winds you should expect on the western flank of the fire. Here are the ones on the eastern flank of the fire, etc. So, I think there appears to be a controversy about whether about eucalyptus and other non-native vegetation that were blamed for the fire. And I want to make sure you know that I and many other people who live in the hills and witnessed the fire saw native vegetation burn in the fire, and certainly coyote brush, which we heard is predominant in some of these areas that are going to be studied, is extremely flammable. Anyone who claims that native trees and plants resist fire does not know what he or she is talking about. I saw native coastline oak and redwood trees burn right down to the ground. And I've seen them come up since, they're exactly where they were before the fire. But they did burn and created embers that spread to houses and throughout the fire area. Some people say that we in HCM don't know anything about fire science. We're amateurs. Why don't we listen to people like Scott Stevens at UC Berkeley, who is, I think, teaches environmental science. Well, we say that people at UC Berkeley certainly have a conflict of interest. And
Yeah, thank you, sorry.
okay, I just want to say that I have several comments here from fire scientists and I'd be happy to share them with you. of people who agree with us and people that we've really studied in depth. We in the Hills Conservation Network are people who live in the hills. We live in the wildland urban interface, and we are very concerned about fire. We certainly don't want another major fire. And don't tell us that we don't care about fire, and also that we want all the eucalyptus trees cut down. That is that we don't want any eucalyptus trees cut down. That is ridiculous.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. Okay, Lynn Barron, Nick Vigilante, then we have Jeff Kahn. Hi, Lynn.
Good evening. I'm a former representative on the Wildfire Prevention Assessment District. Okay. Former representative on the Wildfire Prevention Assessment District. I really appreciate what Dan had to say about community. We had a meeting 2.5 years ago, February 2015, where the Wildfire Prevention Assessment District said, we need to understand what it is that the community needs and wants. And there was a unanimous consensus at that meeting that before any money were to be spent on vegetation management on city properties, we needed to understand what a plan would propose. And hands down, that was the bottom line. So it's not that the Wildfire Prevention Assessment District was saying, we want to stuff this plan down everybody's throat. We were saying, if the fire department is going to spend money, or if there were ever to be a wildfire prevention district put before the voters, we need to have a comprehensive plan to understand what we need to do and how much it's going to cost. Because the Wildfire Prevention District arbitrarily set a number of $66 or $92 or whatever it was per year on all of our tax bills without any inkling as to what it was going to cost to get those goats out there in the fields, or how much it was going to cost to clear 300 miles of roadways, or how much it was going to cost to get those contractors who are willing to pull French broom rather than to cut into our parks and pull that broom. Turns out, Vince Credelli, the supervisor of the Vegetation Management Unit, said, you know, I put out to bid for contractors to pull that French broom, and it's just too darn expensive. We don't have the money for it. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the process of why we are here, which is basically to help advise the city fire department and all the planning departments and all of us as to what is possible and what should be done first. To Dan's point, let's get the biggest bang for the buck. What's the most risky, dangerous area? How much is it going to cost, and can we put our money into that bucket? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Nick Vigilante, then we have Jeff Kahn, and then Alice Friedman. Hi, Nick.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to take this out. So, well, maybe it's not going to cooperate.
It's pretty sensitive. You don't even need to.
It's easier for me. I have 4 items, suggestions that I'd like to present. And the first one was one that I mentioned at the last public meeting, and that was the start time for these meetings. These meetings are starting at 5:30, and for most of the working class people who are out there, it's really not a reasonable time for them to come to a meeting, because they are dealing with their commute from their work, or they're dealing with their families and their children. And as you look around the room here, you see a lot of people that look like me. I'm 62, I'm a retiree, and I don't see a lot of people in here that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And those are the folks that really need to be here and participate in what's happening regarding this plan. So I'm hoping that your future meetings will take place between, say, 6:30, 7 o'clock. It's just a ballpark idea. The second item I have is that we're not using social media platforms like Nextdoor, homeowners association group email lists. We're not using smaller email lists from small block groups or neighborhood watch email lists, and we're not even using the core email list, which I think is probably essential. So too, the woman who presented the idea that we need to be more inclusive and include more people throughout the city of Oakland in this process. I agree with that comment that we can do a better job. In fact, myself, Carolyn Burgess, and Lynn Barron are the only ones who are taking your meeting notices and putting them out there on social media. And I think that there are a lot better ways to present that information out. The third item I have is minutes. I'd like to see minutes from these meetings because these are public meetings, and I haven't seen any minutes that represent what folks have been presenting and what is being presented by the consultants. And I think it's a best practice to do that when you're having a public meeting. You also should give the community an opportunity to weigh in on those minutes so that that is considered as part of the process. The last item, which I have shared with the Assistant Fire Marshal, is I'd like to see for vegetation inspections, not all of them, but where it can happen, where it's possible, the use of drones for that. Because believe it or not, they're used for agricultural applications, they're used for insurance applications, and I think that they can easily be linked with the GIS so that you have a seamless transmission of information regarding parcels. And I think that you'd have to select which parcels are appropriate. That's the task. But I think it might save the city a lot of money, and it could be used for better purposes. So with that, I'm going to conclude because that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's good feedback. Jeff Kahn, we have Alice Friedman, and then Bev. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, I'm here representing the Rockridge Terrace Homeowners Association, which is a community of about 350 homes just to the west of Lake Temescal. Almost all of those homes burned in the fire storm. I was also a member of the wildfire board in the first group. I want to thank you first for not giving up. We lost 10 years here with the FEMA grant, and meanwhile, the vegetation continues to grow, and it's a threat. I've written for the Sierra Club magazine. I've written cover stories. I'm a tree hugger, but there is a bomb with a fuse on it up in the hills, and it needs to be dealt with. 25 people died the last time. Dan, my son, almost died. Yeah. So we can't ignore this, and I thank you for moving ahead. The eucalyptus are absolutely a threat. I also worked at UC Berkeley. I was chief of online information there. Yeah, we have a vested interest. You don't want that university to burn down. I also worked at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, which has done a hell of a lot of work on this. These institutions are self-insured. You know what that means? If they burn, we lose them. So take this seriously. Godspeed to you. We don't have forever on this. And Don't be intimidated. If something needs to be done to prevent this from happening again, do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do your jobs, but there's good science, and it needs to be respected. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Alice Friedman, and then we have Bev, Joe. And then after that, Steve Hansen. Hi, Alice.
Hi. I just want to say that even before our house burned down in the Oakland firestorm, I'd already been reading books about the history of wildfire in America, most of them by Stephen Pine at the University of Arizona. And you can bet I got his book on Australian fires after the fire. And I hope that all of you involved in wildfire read it, because it might light a fire under you and maybe even get you a larger budget. And I think that they maybe go to Australia on official business for ideas about, that they have fire science down over there. And they think what's going on here is nuts, the people I've talked to. So, I have an issue, since we're near the North Oakland Sports Center, that our home is still in threat. And these home fire inspections are meaningless if a fire erupts in the parks or the city-owned properties, because the eucalyptus can send the leaves and other brands 2 miles ahead, lands on cedar-shaped roofs, boom, you've got a fire in that neighborhood now, started by a home and the surrounding homes. It doesn't matter if it had a protectable area. So, and the truth is, if we burn down again, the Hills pays a third of the property taxes. I mean, Oakland will be screwed. Where's the money for the homeless? Where's the money for the police, the fire department? And especially if it happens after the next financial crash. Insurance companies might not even be able to pay. As it is, they delay an average of 3 to 5 years before people are back in their homes again. And I can talk offline about how they do that. And there's books out about how they've gotten better after every disaster. So it's going to take Oakland a long time to recover. Well, I could go on, but one last thing. I love biodiversity so much, and I majored in biology and have studied natural history since then. I take 4th and 5th graders on hikes and show them the birds and the plants and everything up in Marin County. And when I come back here, I feel like it's Night of the Living Dead in the eucalyptus. They poison the soil. There's only like French broom, poison oak, and blackberries. It's just lifeless. And so all the biodiverse 6,000 species of California can't speak for themselves, but if I might do so, I would like to, because that's another reason that we should be getting rid of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. Bev, then we have Steve Hansen, and I just can't even read the next name. It's literally a scribble. So